circles of fire. Hell wasn't what he imagined. It wasn't a place of piercing screams or lakes of fire. It was a monotonous, endless gray routine. Ori, trapped there for what seemed like eternity, realized that the real suffering was boredom, the absence of hope, and the ceaseless repetition of meaningless tasks. One day, as he dragged his feet through the gray dust, Ori came across a different wall. Unlike the others, carved out of cold, lifeless stone, this one was etched with markings, sentences, words, and symbols he couldn't decipher. Among the etchings, one line stood out: "The way out begins within." The words ignited something in him. Begins within? What does that mean? He repeated to himself, trying to understand. Trapped in his inner world, Ori began to ponder a question he had never dared ask himself. How did I get here? For days, perhaps weeks or months, time in hell didn't matter. He searched within himself for the moment when everything went wrong. He delved into his memories, revisiting times he had failed, betrayed, or caused harm. The deeper he dug, the more he realized the key wasn't in denial, but in acceptance. He needed to acknowledge his mistakes, seek forgiveness, and forgive himself. When he did, a small shift occurred within him. Hell began to look different. The place hadn't changed, but he had. The etchings on the wall started to glow, and Ori realized they were like a mirror. The deeper he went into his inner process, the more they revealed themselves, uncovering new words. Step 1, forgiveness. Step 2, action. Ori understood the message. He had to act, not just reflect. He began helping others around him, who were also suffering. He shared his insights, comforted them, and showed them that the way out wasn't physical. It was an inner transformation that led to genuine action in the external world. Eventually, the moment came. One day, without warning, the gray around him vanished. He stood in a quiet, green, vibrant place. There was no doubt in his heart. He had escaped. But the lesson he learned in hell stayed with him forever. First moral of the story. The way out often begins with deep self-awareness and a willingness to change. The true hell isn't where we are, it's who we choose to be. The journey continues. Ori stood on the lush green ground and took a deep breath. It was the first sensation of freedom he had felt since his soul was trapped. The air was light and pleasant, but within him was a storm. He didn't know if this was heaven or just another stop in the test. Despite the calm around him, something inside knew the journey wasn't over. What now? He asked himself. A lone tree stood in the distance, and dangling from its branches was a note. Ori walked toward it. The note was written in familiar handwriting, as if he himself had written it. The real test begins here. Choose your path, but remember, not everyone who seems free is truly free. The words struck him. The hell he endured was, first and foremost, locked inside him. Guilt, shame, and fears he hadn't dared to confront. But what did it mean to be truly free? Was this green world the place where he could finally rest? He began walking, exploring his surroundings. As he moved forward, he noticed he wasn't alone. Other people started appearing around him. They were familiar faces, friends he had lost, family he had distanced himself from, and shadowy figures who seemed like strangers, but evoked a deep sense of familiarity. Each carried something, a word, a look, or a gesture, that stirred buried emotions within Ori. The truth hit him. This place wasn't the end of the journey. It was a different kind of hell. This time, it wasn't about fire or ash. It was the emotional pain of facing those he had hurt. With every step he took, he felt the weight of their expectant gazes, their silent demands for acknowledgement or forgiveness. "What do you want from me?" he shouted toward them, almost pleading. But they didn't answer. They just stood there, silent, waiting. He understood. He needed to act, not wait for miracles. He started with those he recognized. Facing a friend he had lost in a fight, Ori opened his heart, apologized, and explained his mistakes. With a family member he had abandoned, he stood tall and said, "I want you to know I'm here now. I ask for your forgiveness, and I forgive you." The more he did this, the lighter he felt. But there were strangers he didn't know how to approach. When he tried, they simply turned away and disappeared, as if to remind him that some wounds couldn't be healed, but could be released. The fears emerge. As the world around him shifted again, the fears returned with force. They weren't just feelings anymore, but dark shapes that followed him. Failure, loneliness, forgetfulness. They whispered to him, "You won't succeed. You'll fall. You're not enough." At night, his dreams were filled with endless abysses. In one dream, Ori saw himself struggling to rise, but a voice inside whispered, "There's no real escape." When he woke from the dream, he understood. He was fighting himself. He was trying to push his fears away instead of accepting them as part of who he was. The turning point. Ori stopped running. He began naming his fears, talking to them. "Yes, I'm afraid, but I'm here. My fears don't define me." When he looked his fears in the eyes, they began to change. Instead of enemies, they became guides. True freedom. Finally, he stood before a new gate. He didn't know where it led, but this time, he wasn't afraid. He knew that true freedom wasn't the absence of fear. It was the ability to live alongside it. As he walked through the gate, he understood that the real journey was only beginning, and he was ready for whatever came next. Expanded moral of the story. Escaping hell isn't about running from difficulties or fears, but accepting them as part of who we are. True freedom lies in the ability to confront, embrace, and integrate every part of ourselves, even the darkest ones. Chapter 3. The Spirits of Inner Hell. The gate closed behind Ori, leaving him in a place unlike any he had encountered before. The air shimmered, heavy with an energy that seemed alive, vibrating with whispers and echoes. He wasn't sure if the sound came from outside or within. The green, calm landscape was gone, replaced by a shifting haze of shadow and light, a mirror of emotions that felt foreign and familiar all at once. Then they appeared. At first, they were faint, almost transparent, figures emerging from the mist. But as Ori squinted to make sense of them, they became clearer. These weren't just strangers or apparitions. These were spirits, each representing a piece of him, fragments of his past, echoes of his thoughts, and shadows of feelings he had long tried to bury. "Who are you?" Ori asked, his voice trembling but firm enough to cut through the murmuring air. One spirit stepped forward, its form constantly shifting, like smoke in the wind. Its face was unrecognizable, yet Ori knew it intimately. Its voice was soft, yet it struck like thunder. "I am regret," it said. "You created me when you replayed the past over and over, wishing for a different outcome." Ori froze as the weight of the words settled on him. Another spirit approached, more forceful in its presence, its form flickering with an almost unbearable intensity. "And I," it said, "I am anger. You summoned me every time you blamed others for the pain you could not face." They continued to appear, one by one. Guilt, doubt, fear, and shame. Each claimed their space around him, circling like predators, yet never striking. Instead, they lingered, watching, waiting. The whispering chains. As the spirits gathered, Ori felt an invisible weight pulling him down. The air around him thickened, his chest tightened, and for the first time since he left the gray monotony of the first hell, he felt truly helpless. The whispers grew louder, now forming words. "You'll never escape. You are not enough. You cannot undo what you've done." Ori fell to his knees, gripping the ground, which shifted like sand beneath him. "Why won't you leave me alone?" he cried out. But the spirits didn't leave. They grew closer. Then, one spirit spoke, its tone soft, yet unwavering. "We are not here to destroy you. We are here because you refuse to face us." Ori looked up, his breathing heavy. The spirit continued. "You've tried to silence us, deny us, and lock us away. But we are you, Ori. Until you listen, we will never leave." A choice of confrontation. Ori realized he had a choice. He could either continue to fight, to resist the spirits, or he could do what he feared most, confront them. With a deep breath, he stood, though his legs trembled under the weight of their presence. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. His voice cracked, but it carried a resolve he hadn't felt before. Regret stepped forward again, its form softening slightly. "See me," it said. "Acknowledge me. I am not your enemy. I exist because you are human. Without me, you wouldn't learn from your mistakes." Ori nodded, though his heart pounded. He turned to Anger, who burned brighter now. "What about you?" Anger flared, but didn't strike. "I am your fire. I am here to remind you of your boundaries, to protect you when the world becomes too much. But you've misused me. You've let me consume you instead of guiding you." One by one, the spirits revealed their truths. Guilt, though heavy, reminded him of his conscience. Doubt, though paralyzing, urged him to question and grow. Even fear, the most persistent of all, wasn't just an obstacle. It was a guardian, warning him of danger, but also of the risks worth taking. The integration. As Ori listened, the spirits began to change. Their forms grew less menacing, their voices less accusatory. They no longer circled him like predators. Instead, they became part of the space around him, merging into the air, the ground, and even within him. "What's happening?" Ori asked, his voice shaking. A new voice, softer than the rest, echoed from within him. "You're accepting us. We are not here to punish you. We are here to guide you. The hell you've been trapped in isn't a place. It's the battle within yourself." For the first time, Ori felt a strange sense of peace. The weight on his chest lifted, and the haze around him began to clear. He realized that the spirits weren't gone. They were part of him now, integrated into his being, no longer separate entities to be feared. A new journey. When the mist fully cleared, Ori found himself standing on a path. It was neither gray nor green, but a vibrant mix of colors, constantly shifting, reflecting the complexity of his emotions and thoughts. He took a step forward, knowing this was the beginning of a new journey, one where he would no longer run from himself, but learn to walk alongside every part of who he was. The next lesson awaits. As he walked, a thought occurred to him. If the spirits of his inner hell were his own creations, what else lay within him, waiting to be discovered? The road ahead was unknown, but for the first time, Ori didn't feel fear. Instead, he felt curiosity, a willingness to face whatever came next. Expanded moral. The greatest battles are fought within, not to defeat our inner demons, but to understand and embrace them. True freedom comes not from escaping ourselves, but from accepting every part of who we are, finding strength in the integration of our shadows and light.